Revelation 17 speaks of a woman dressed in scarlet, riding on a beast. Who is she? That's a very interesting question, I'm sure you'll agree. And here to talk about the identity of that woman is Bill Salus. Bill, you've done a lot of studying and a lot of writing on the woman on the beast.
Yes, absolutely. The mysterious woman of Revelation 17, and we also get into Revelation 18 to talk about that as well, to uncover her identity.
And her identity, by the way, tells us a great deal about how to interpret Bible prophecy.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because it talks about in Revelation 17:5, it says, and on her forehead a name was written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. So, and that's all large capital letters. In other words, that's how important it is that we try to understand what is being said in Revelation 17 and 18.
And there's been so much discussion about Babylon, or quote-unquote mystery Babylon, and there have been debates, even as you have been involved in some of the debates about the identity of the mystery city of Babylon and the identity of the woman, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And Bill's done a lot of thinking about this.
Yeah, and you're right. It is headquartered in a great city. We're told that in numerous places in Revelation 17, 18, and also in Revelation 18.
So it's an important city.
It's an important city, and inside of the city, of course, is the undertakings of what's going on, described as the religious Babylon of Revelation 17 and the commercial Babylon of Revelation 18. You know, mankind has a double religious jeopardy in the end times. You've got a harlot world religion. We pick up her story in Revelation chapter 17. Ultimately, she goes through a time where the 10 kings in cahoots with the Antichrist desolate her. And then they give, in Revelation 17, verse 16, and then those 10 kings convey their power and authority to the Antichrist, and he sets up his scenario, his kingdom. And of course, now we go to Revelation 13. So we're in Revelation 17, but his scenario picks up in Revelation 13, where, of course, you got the false prophet. He puts together his caste society, the mark of the beast, etc. So what's interesting is when a lot of people look at Revelation 17 and 18, they often think, well, Revelation 18 just simply gives us more details of Revelation 17, but not necessarily so. I'm going to lay a couple quotes out real quick to kind of break this down about the chronological order of those verses. You know, John Wolford, we'll start with him.
Okay.
In his Bible, Every Prophecy of the Bible, on pages 603 and 612, he says the book of Revelation was written in the order in which the truth was revealed to John, but the events described are not necessarily in chronological order. This is especially true of Revelation 17, which probably occurred during the first half of the last 7 years of first half of the tribulation. And then he goes on and says, actually, the destruction of chapter 17, which we talked about, the desolation by the 10 kings of the harlot, and the destruction of chapter 18 are two separate, like we just said, separate events, separated by 3.5 years. So in other words, religious Babylon in the first half, desolated by the 10 kings. Commercial Babylon in the second half, desolated by the Lord in 1 hour. And Dave Gusick has a book called Verse by Verse Commentary of Revelation. He sums that up in a real simple quote. In my view, it is best to see them as intertwined, yet somewhat distinct. Religious Babylon of Revelation 17 is judged at the midpoint of the tribulation, of the 7-year period of tribulation. The commercial Babylon, Revelation 18, is judged at the end of that period. So we have to look at how does this all lay out on the timeline. We're in the church age now. What happens afterwards? How is man hit with this double trouble, this double jeopardy? The harlot, the Antichrist, the judgments that come on Babylon. How are they all connected to Babylon? What's the mystery? This type of thing.
And I think most of all, as I'm sitting here listening to you, how important is Babylon? How important is it to know this, all about Babylon? Because somebody could say, well, that's in the future, you know, it's It's not going to concern me. I'm going in the rapture before Babylon becomes to great power and so forth and so on. So why should I even look at this?
Well, that's a very important question, because you're right. This, from us being pre-tribulation rapture believers, this is after us.
Yeah.
The world religion and the Antichrist system, the beastly system, happen after us. People are very intrigued when we talk about Mystery Babylon. It's interesting to me, whenever I do radio or TV on this or write articles, we get a lot of views and reads on that because they're actually interested in what is this mystery. But, the real reason we're concerned, Gary, is that, we have people that we know and love right now who have not received the Lord.
Right.
That will be left behind, and they will go through this double trouble, this double jeopardy. And when we understand the details of these judgments and what the activities are going on, the details of the harlot and what's going on with the commercial system of the Antichrist, it's perilous, Gary. It's perilous for them, and we're concerned for them.
And you've got a little diagram here, which I'm looking at right now, that shows the church age, and then post-rapture, and going into the tribulation. And you show Revelation 17, the harlot, the Antichrist, and so forth, being a big part of the opening years of the tribulation. In other words, all of this is being formed as we speak.
Yeah, because you're right. In other words, the harlot world religion, in my estimation, is already in place, but not had her call to duty yet, which will happen after the rapture of the church. When the real bride is gone, the counterfeit bride will kick in, the harlot world religion. It's interesting when I teach on this stuff, and on the DVD you're actually going to be offering, one of the messages is dealing with the mysterious woman of Revelation 17 and 18. I show an image of this timeline you're talking about that you were just looking at, the church age. And I actually put a picture of you in there because who represents the church age better than Gary Stearman, right?
Thank you, Bill, very much. But I have to decline to accept that great mantle.
Yeah, but it's cute. I do an image and you shoot up, and Jesus Christ comes and takes Gary and the rest of us up. But then we go into the timeline and we go into a gap on the image, and we have a time gap. Because it's not the rapture that starts the tribulation period.
Yeah.
It's a confirmation of a false covenant. So we've got this unspecified time period called the time gap. That is when this harlot world religion is going to start to come in. There's not going to be a lot of time in between after the rapture. Satan is going to call this woman to duty to deceive mankind. And then, of course, who is the harlot, where she headquartered? That's other topics we'll talk about.
Well, and let's go there right now for a second, because I remember the European currency, when the European market was supposed to result in a 10-state system with a common currency. And guess who was shown on the currency? It was the woman riding a beast.
That's right.
Now, that's strange. Why would you do that?
And that's right out of the text of Revelation 17.
It is.
It talks about this mystery Babylon, this woman sitting on the beast referring to the Antichrist. Revelation 17, verse 3, I believe that is. Revelation 17, verse 7, I think it is. It says that he carries her to her heights. So what's interesting is we're talking about double trouble in the end times. It's not the Antichrist that comes on the scene in power first. He's in cahoots. He's actually being subservient to prop up this harlot world religious system. So, they're both involved, and it's this unholy alliance between church and state. But you're right. I mean, and I believe the Antichrist comes out of the revived Roman Empire, Daniel 9:26. The proof text is he comes out of the people who destroyed the city and the sanctuary. So many of us, I think yourself included, believe in a Euro-centered, Western-centered European charismatic world leader, the Antichrist, coming out of revived Europe, Roman Empire.
That would seem to be the case.
Yeah.
In fact, the name, if you go back into ancient history, 1,000 years before Christ, the woman Europa rode upon the beast whose name was Zeus. So this is an ancient picture. Right.
And leave it to Satan to take those old scenarios and move them into a modern, scenario for us. You can put lipstick on a pig, but you can't change the looks of that pig, right? But he's going to be up to his antics, and you got those images already with the woman on the beast and the European scenario and all that. But the details of the harlot are kind of interesting for those of the viewers who are not aware of it. In a nutshell, this is a religion that rules over many nations, Revelation 17:15. It's headquartered in a great city. We'll talk about the mystery and how we can uncover what that city is.
Right.
Revelation 17:18. It's located upon 7 hills. panders to political leaders because it says she's the kings of the earth are drunk with the wine of her fornication, as are the peoples of the earth. Now that fornication, the term would be spiritual idolatry, not fornication per se, as we would say adultery,
right,
or spiritual idolatry. She's the opiate of the masses, as such, the inhabitants of the earth also. But this religion is deadly. It has martyred believers in the past. It says she's drunk with the blood of the saints and the martyrs of Jesus. Two different time frames here. In the past, Revelation 17:6, and in the future, the martyrs of Jesus. There will be persecution. That's one of the reasons we're concerned. That's why this is important. People who get left behind will suffer persecution, the martyrs of Jesus. Not only from the Antichrist, who will be beheading them for not taking his mark, but even prior to that, this entity, this harlot world religion, will be drunk with the martyrs of Jesus as well. She'll be hated by the 10 kings. There will be 10 kings coming up, surfacing in the world, and they will desolate her, this is Revelation 17:16, and turn all their power and authority over to the beast at that point. She will overextend her usefulness, and on the timeline we show, that happens at the middle of the tribulation period, and then we turn our attention to Revelation 13 for the second half of the tribulation, his system, his beastly system.
Now that system, the world system, is trying very hard at this moment to come to life. If you look at all of the infighting in Europe, for example, and in Canada, and several other countries, Russia, you see people contending for power, the oligarchs, the big money people. And I think the 10 kings mentioned by Daniel in Revelation are going to come out of this group that's struggling for identity right now. Mm-hmm. And in fact, Daniel even describes the struggle as 10 kings, and then the Antichrist strikes down some of them and rises to power over the kings. So we may be seeing the very leading edge right now. When we look at what's going on in Europe, we look at what's going on in the United States, Canada, and other countries, we may be seeing the leading edge of those 10 kings battling for power.
Well, it's interesting because when they come on the scene, and specifically we talk about them in the middle of the tribulation desolating the harlot in Revelation 17:16, the world is a different looking place at that point between now and then. Right now, I don't know the exact number, nearly a couple hundred countries per se in the world. Uh-huh. But the world is going to be in a position where it's sort of governed over by 10 kings, it appears, by, if we understand the details of that prophecy. So the world changes. And then, of course, they give their power to the Antichrist to make it his global system per se. 3 of them get subdued by the Antichrist. Maybe it's when he goes into the temple and declares himself to be above all that's called God and does the abomination of death. Maybe 3 of them go, oh, we didn't buy in for this. I don't know, but it does say he subdues 3 of those kings according to Daniel. But they start out together as 10 in alignment with the Antichrist. Ultimately, 3 of them have an end and an expiration.
Now, I always approach the study of Bible prophecy pragmatically, meaning I look at it from a practical aspect. Why should I, as a Christian living right now, in the year 2018, even be concerned with this? How should I look at all these things? And of course, I'm very interested, and I've studied the scriptures we're discussing right now, because I think that the way to get perspective on what's happening today is to look at how things are going to play out in the very near future. And I think we're seeing it right before our very eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. And a very perilous period, right? So we're concerned about those who get left behind, but at the same token,
we are.
To understand Bible prophecy, you do have to have, I think, a broad view of all of it, not just specific little issues. You need to kind of understand how all the puzzle pieces lay out and how they chronologically probably set up in order.
Exactly. Now, we've looked at the harlot. Let's look at the city, Mystery Babylon the Great. There have been books written identifying the location of that city. Babylon, for example, which is south of Baghdad in Iraq today, is basically ruins. It's a dried out old city, but yet some people have said, no, it's going to come back to life again. It'll be Mystery Babylon the Great. Others have other places picked out that they think will be that mystery city. And I know you have an idea backed by Scripture.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're right. There are 5 primary candidate cities: Rome, rebuilt Babylon, Iraq. Those are the 2 of the more popular views. Joel Richardson came out recently with Mecca, as Islam being the harlot world religion. Some people believe it could be New York City in America. And then Jerusalem is a less popular, but some people think that as well. Yeah. We're dealing with Mystery Babylon. And when we talk about mystery in the New Testament, by definition, and there's several mysteries in the New Testament, it was concealed. This is easy to remember. Something was concealed in the Old Testament, but is being revealed in the New Testament, and it was hidden, but now it's coming to light. And we normally have, like, for instance, Christ revealed a mystery in Revelation chapter 1 of the 7 stars and the 7 candlesticks. He said the 7 candlesticks are the churches, and the 7 stars are the angels or the messengers to those 7 churches. Paul revealed a mystery in 1 Corinthians 15 where he said that we would all be transformed in the twinkling of an eye when we get our resurrected bodies. Well, fortunately for us, we don't have to guess at what this mystery is. The angel talking to John in Revelation 17 says in verse 7, I will reveal the mystery to you. Here's what he says. The angel said to me, but why did you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman. And he goes on to say, and also the beast that carries her, which has 7 heads and 10 horns. So he goes on from Revelation 17:7 on to Revelation 17:8, revealing the mystery of those, the beasts, the 7 heads, the heads and the horns rather. But we're going to focus on the woman. He gives us 3 key verses on the identity of the woman, what we need to know. Revelation 17:9. We get the geographic location. The angel tells John she sits on 7 hills, which is, of course, was the classic historical name for the eternal city of Rome, the city that sits on 7 hills. There are even coinage back in that time of the goddess Roma, lounging on the 7 hills of Rome. Then he goes on and tells us in verse 15, another revelation of the mystery. It has a global reach, a global religion, because it says, John saw this woman sitting on many waters, and he says, John, these waters are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. In other words, it's a worldwide embrace. It's located on 7 hills. It's got a global reach. But to me, the real telling clue as we go to Revelation 17:18, he says it's a great city. It's headquartered in a great city. And here's how he says it. And if we unpack it, I think it gives us a very important clue. He says, and the woman which you saw, he's talking to John. John comes into the vision. He sees this woman, this mystery Babylon. He goes, you saw her, the woman you saw, John. And now he brings him into the present tense. It is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. So, John, what you saw is what you go through right now, historical, grammatical concept. That was Rome. And John's understanding, clearly we would say, well, that's Rome. That was the city that reigned over the kings of the earth. One other thing.
And I'd like to just throw this at you for a minute. I'll have your comment on it. There are 4 great dynastic rules, as given in the Bible: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. Rome being the last. So it kind of feels natural, since Rome is the last of the great powers, for the mystery city to be Rome.
I concur. That's another good point to add into that. The other thing that I think is a real clue to us to help us with the city, a lot of people haven't looked at this yet, and it's from Revelation 18:20, and it says in Revelation 19:2, I'm going to read this verse, dealing with the judgment of Babylon. For true and righteous are his judgments, for he hath judged the great whore, which did corrupt the earth, and her fornication hath avenged the blood of his servants at her hand. So it talks about the judgment that's going to come. There's actually 2 judgments: the desolation of the 10 kings of the harlot in Revelation 17, and then the destruction of the Antichrist system in Revelation 18, in 1 hour, Revelation 18:21 and elsewhere. But here's what he says in Revelation 18:20. When that judgment happens, rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets for God. For God hath avenged you on her. So rejoice over ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged her on you. In other words, the way we look at that is the holy apostles at the time of Jesus Christ are being vindicated at the time of the judgment. In other words, 2 or more, the way I would interpret that, Gary, is 2 or more of the holy apostles at the time had to have been executed by these governing authorities, and when they were judged, they were being vindicated. And when we look at the city that qualifies for that, you go back and you had Rome, you had Paul, the Apostle Paul was beheaded in Rome.
Yes.
You had the Apostle Peter was crucified under the Roman Emperor Nero. You had Andrew, the Apostle Andrew was crucified under the order of a Roman governor. And then you also had the Apostle James, the brother of the Apostle John, was killed by a client king of Rome. So when you look at these other cities, Babylon, there were no holy apostles back during the time of Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian Empire. You look at Mecca, that was not, the holy apostles were not killed by any, they weren't even around when Mecca was coming into its fruition as the headquarters of Islam around the 7th century. New York City didn't even exist during the time of the Holy Apostles, per se. Jerusalem's kind of an interesting argument because in Revelation 18:21, it says that it'll be thrown down in 1 hour. Babylon, the second judgment, will be destroyed in 1 hour, and it will never be found anymore. So it has an expiration date, whatever this Babylon is, wherever it's located. Now, the problem with that is in Jeremiah 3:17, it says that actually when Christ comes in the Messianic kingdom, his throne will be established in Jerusalem. So there's a real contradiction there.
Right.
Now, how can you have your throne in a place that can never be found anymore?
That's very true. So going back then, if you establish Rome then as this mystery city, what does that tell you? Where do you go from there?
Well, where do you have there? You had the history of pagan Rome and morphed into papal Rome. One of the things that comes up about this city is it's judged for its crimes and sins. And here's what we're told about this. And remember, we're talking about the judgment, and the holy apostles are being vindicated in Revelation 18:20. Revelation 18:5, for her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. One translation, the Holman Christian Standard Bible, says, for her sins are piled as high as heaven, and God has remembered her crimes. Well, let's look at the crimes of the city, the dual aspects of pagan Rome and papal Rome. Pagan Rome, under the Caesars and the Roman Empire, put to death God's Son, Jesus Christ. I'd consider that a pretty big crime and sin.
Yes.
Martyred Christians for 3 centuries, some sources say could be as many as 210,000. That's in the spread of Christianity through persecutions acknowledgement. Killed 1.1 million people, mostly Jews, according to the Jewish historian Josephus, in 70 A.D. Destroys the temple in the city of Jerusalem in 70 A.D. Destroys Jerusalem again at the Bar Kokhba revolt in 135 A.D., and killed hundreds of thousands of Jews around 132 to 135 A.D. at that time. But the Roman Empire started to collapse, and they found it politically expedient to embrace Christianity as a religion of the church, of the state. So you had this scenario come on where all of a sudden we went from pagan Rome to papal Rome, and of course now that's where the Vatican is. So what you had there was they expelled Jews from Spain in 1492 AD. They expelled Jews from Portugal in 1497 AD, killed tens of thousands of Jews in the Crusades, killed hundreds of thousands of Protestants during the Inquisition's period, and some estimates could be up in the millions on that. And what about the responsibility of these 100,000 victims of sexual abuse in America, not to mention worldwide?
And by the way, going back, if you've read Fox's Book of Martyrs, going back into the Dark Ages, 800 A.D., 1000 A.D., 1200 A.D., when you say hundreds of thousands of Christians were martyred by Rome, that may be a bit of a figure that falls short.
Well, it depends on whether you're looking at Protestant accounts or Catholic accounts.
Right.
Catholic accounts don't make it sound as many. They acknowledge it, though.
But it happened, and of course it was headquartered in Rome.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so and that whole thing about Rome, there are many people who believe have considered, it's a more popular view. And we'll talk about Babylon if we have time in just a minute. But
sure,
you look back to the church fathers like Lactantius, Tertullius, Irenaeus, Jerome. The reformers, you had Martin Luther, John Knox, John Tyndale, John Calvin. Modern day expositors, Tim LaHaye, Hal Lindsey, David Reagan, Dave Hunt, Billy Crone, myself. I believe you even think so as well. I mean, the list goes on. Grant Jeffries, Clarence Larkin. They have continued to say this is Rome. So now let's talk about Mystery Babylon.
And before we go on about Mystery Babylon, from time to time I've entertained other locations. For a while, New York, Babylon itself. A few years ago, that was very fashionable to believe. And so I've looked at all these alternatives, and like you, I have come around to settling on Rome itself.
I'm glad, because I feel like I'm in good company now. But literal Babylon is interesting too, rebuilt Babylon, Iraq, because first of all, it's a mystery. It doesn't say literal, Babylon. So there would be no mystery if it was rebuilt Babylon. Also, no holy apostles were executed correct. Babylon. And also, it had to be rebuilt to be a great city, described in these verses. And it's a war-torn area. I mean, some of the advocates would say, well, it's rebuilt, like Dubai, it could be, or whatever. Well, maybe. But I just think the arguments for Rome make that argument pale in comparison.
I would like to take a moment now, before we run out of time, and talk with you about some DVDs you've produced. Here is a debate that you had with Joel Richardson, Mystery Babylon, Mecca or Rome. And again, I think that debate needed to be aired.
It was incredible research on both sides.
Yeah.
And it was a debate, but it was also an intelligent discussion, a very good information.
America and the coming Mideast wars. Well, listen,
Psalm 83 and Ezekiel 38.
And listen, we're seeing that right now.
That's right.
Planes are in the air as we speak. I mean, and America is involved amidst great controversy. There are some who would like to see us pull out completely. Others would like to see us go in a little deeper into the Mideast. But you've covered a lot in America and the coming Mideast wars. Psalm 83, we've talked about this many, many times. Psalm 83.
There's actually 3 discs in that, 3 lessons in that DVD.
And Apocalypse Road. Now, this one is a while back, but a fascinating rendering of Revelation, making Revelation easier to understand.
Right, the time gap, we talked about the time gap.
And nuclear showdown in Iran. That's current events. The Iranians are shooting off ballistic missiles even as we speak.
That's right, sending precision-guided missile heads into Lebanon for Hezbollah right now.
Yeah.
Ancient prophecy of Elam is revealed in there.
And again, Bill has said a lot about Elam. Maybe you haven't even ever heard that name. Well, check it out in the Bible and then watch this DVD, Nuclear Showdown in Iran. And finally, the Now Prophecies. The Now Prophecies talk about what precisely?
The prophecies that could happen at the present time. They lack preconditions. We could wake up one morning and they could find fulfillment. The destruction of Damascus in Isaiah 17, the Iran prophecy you talked about, and several other ones.
Now, I want to get to the incredible offer that we're making for you right now. We've just shown you 6 DVDs, and we've also got the Next Prophecies book and DVD, which you will receive absolutely free when you purchase these 6 DVDs. And you're going to have a Bill Salus library for a gift of $75 to Prophecy Watchers. Free shipping anywhere in the United States. This is a package.
All right, the Next Prophecies follow the Now Prophecies, and now we've got a DVD that goes with that book.
Amazing. And again, for a gift of $75, you just go to prophecywatchers.tv, go to the online bookstore, click on it, scroll down, you'll find Bill Salus's name, you'll find a number of his books, and you'll find this offer, the Bill Salus DVD collection. Your gift of $75 gets you all this, and it's very, very current. Bill constantly studies and adds to his thesis. You know, we've got to run because the clock has once again caught up with us. And I hate to stop right now because I feel like there's a lot more to say. But thanks for coming by,
Thanks,
Bill.
Gary.
I'm Gary Stearman. Hey, you keep watching. We are. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.